10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 342. Hey, Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome back into episode 342 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Really happy to have you in, and this week we're going to continue our series on the blues with the great and legendary Charlie Parker. And this solo is going to be a little bit different from what you expect from Charlie Parker. It's actually at a manageable tempo, and the solo is actually reproducible on our horns, which is going to be really cool. But before we jump into the episode, just wanted to mention really quickly, this is a listener-supported show. We rely on listeners just like you to support the podcast, keep it coming out in the form of a small monthly donation, and in return, you do get PDFs and audio examples and a bunch of awesome jazz education materials. We use the Patreon platform to support this show, and you can find that and get signed up by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, and getting yourself signed up for instant access to every single episode that we've ever done. I wanted to give a quick shout out to some new supporters this month. Thank you to our new $5 patrons, Tom and Michael. And thank you to Mark and Alexander for editing your pledges from $3 up to $5 for those extra benefits. So again, if you want to support the show, you believe in what we're doing, and you want awesome jazz education materials in return, go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up today. So we can't ignore Charlie Parker, right? You probably all knew this was coming in this series of musicians that we're studying over the blues, and we're finally here. So we are going to take a look at Charlie Parker's solo on the composition Cool Blues. And this is from a recording in 1947 with Erroll Garner. And we're actually looking at the entire solo, which consists of only 2 choruses. And as I mentioned, this is actually at a very manageable tempo. It's about, between 150 and 170 BPM. And Charlie Parker doesn't do his Charlie Parker thing where there's a ton of double time or crazy tempos, which is why I think it's such a great solo to really dive into his playing, because we can actually play it without too much friction. Now, one thing I want to mention about this recording is that there's a bunch of alternate takes from this recording session from this tune, and the one that I chose was take 3, because it was at a little bit of a slower tempo, and I just really love the solo. So this is another example of just a standard 12-bar blues, but one of the other cool things that we're going to get out of studying this particular one is that it's actually a concert C blues, which is not something we see super often, and I think one of the things that we should all be doing in our practice time, especially over the blues, is starting to address some of those less common keys, right? Like most of the blues that we play are either in B flat or F concert pitch. And it can be really easy to never get outside of those keys because all the tunes that we play are in those. But of course, we want to remind ourselves that the blues progression and the chords in the blues are kind of a microcosm of really the entire jazz language. So it would be really beneficial to us to examine these different components of the blues in less familiar keys. And this solo gives us a great opportunity to step outside of that traditional B flat and F and start to address a key like C. It's not really that hard of a key, but it might be an unfamiliar key to us, which is really important. So let's start by checking out Charlie Parker's blues statement over this particular tune, and then we will chat about it a little bit. So what a fantastic, brief presentation of a solo. What a great statement that he makes over this. It's simple enough. He leaves a lot of space. And there's a couple of things that I think we can sort of zero in on in this particular solo. So let's go through a couple of those. So the first thing I want you to notice is in all the cadential points in the blues, I want you to really think about what he's doing. So spots where there's a 5-to-1 relationship, I think this solo is a masterful way of handling some of those, and we can learn a lot about those points in the blues by studying this solo. So your first assignment is to look at a couple of different places. So first of all, the transition from bar 4 into bar 5, where we're modulating to the key of the 4. That bar 4 is a place where musicians love to use tension and release, where they love to use these really cool melodic statements that lead us to the next bar. And I want you to think about how Charlie Parker is doing that in both of his choruses over this particular solo. Now, the next place would be bar 8 into bar 9. That is the 6 chord leading to the 2 chord. And if you think about the relationship between the 6 and the 2, the 6 is a 5 of 2. So again, we get that 5-to-1 relationship. And then, of course, we want to look at the full long 2-5-1 in bars 9 and 10, leading us into the resolution point in bar 11. So I want you to really study what Charlie Parker is doing. Take out a piece of notebook paper and actually try to explain what he's doing and why it's so effective, because he's doing just some awesome stuff. So those are 3 points that you can really zero in on when it comes to this solo. The second thing is the texture and interval combinations that Charlie Parker uses. We've talked about this before in the playing of Charlie Parker. He has this masterful way of sort of always changing directions or using a really interesting interval in his lines to keep your interest, to keep you wanting to hear more, to keep his playing a little bit unpredictable, which at the end of the day, that's kind of what we want to do. We want to keep our listener guessing. What are they going to play next? I know it's going to be something awesome, and I can't wait to hear what they play in the next measure or the next chorus or whatever it might be. So let's come up with maybe one example, and then you can find and study the rest of the solo and come up with where he's doing some of this stuff. So let's look at the second chorus, measure 19, actually, to be more specific. So what we see in this line is this. Now, it might just seem to you, okay, well, that's just like anything else that he would play. It's just a little random kind of nondescript phrase, but it's not. We're demonstrating a lot of things here. So I want you to go to beat 3, and you'll notice that he goes from concert E down to concert G. Now, the key word there being down to concert G. Because what Charlie Parker could have done is he could have stayed in the register that he was playing in, and he could have played this. And that would have been fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But Charlie Parker likes to, what Barry Harris calls pivot, which basically means that you're jumping away from a note and displacing it by an octave to create a more interesting texture when you're playing this. So check out the difference between these two. If we stay in the same octave, as opposed to what Charlie Parker actually did, I think it provides for a much more interesting texture, right? Again, it keeps you guessing. It's like, what octave is he going to go to next? And I think that, okay, if you go from E down to G, you get the interval of a sixth. If you go from E up to G, you get the interval of a third. A wider interval is sometimes a lot more interesting. Same note, We're just determining what octave we're going to play it in. Now, he does stuff like this pivoting, this octave displacement, a bunch of times in this solo. So your second job this week is to comb through the solo and figure out where he's using that octave displacement, that pivot, to create a more interesting interval, a wider interval. And I think you'll find a couple of instances of that in these two choruses alone. All right. So hopefully you got something out of that. Hopefully this is that Charlie Parker solo that you can actually approach and complete, be able to play in a reasonable period of time. Again, that nice slow tempo and the fact that he's not really playing those extended double time phrases. This makes it really approachable and allows us to get into the playing of Charlie Parker. So let me know if you have any questions. Remember, if you want to get the PDF to this, we do have it in concert, B flat, E flat, and bass clef for you over at the Patreon site. And you can find that and sign up to support the show by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, and getting yourself signed up today. Hope you all had fantastic holidays and Happy New Year to all of you. And let's make this the year that we really, really accelerate our jazz playing to the next level. And I hope I'm here to help you do that. All right, we'll see you next week with another episode. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.